Welcome, my dear keen listeners. Today is a very, very special day. Universal Children's Day. A day dedicated to celebrating the young, the curious, and the kind-hearted. Now, a long time ago, way back in 1959, people came together to make sure every child in the world had rights. The right to feel safe, to be heard, and to dream big. And now, every year, on November the 20th, we celebrate this day to remind everyone just how important children are. So, to honour this beautiful day, join me on a little adventure. It's the story of a little girl who felt unseen, but discovered the magic of kindness and courage. So let's listen closely to the tale of the invisible child. In a small, cosy town, where the streets were lined with colourful houses and gardens bursting with flowers, there lived a girl named Lila. She was kind and thoughtful, but often felt overlooked. Her days were quiet, filled with whispers of, "Not now, Lila," or, "Oh, maybe later, sweetie." Even at school, her classmates didn't call her name when they were forming teams, and she often ate alone during lunch. Now, that very particular morning, the sunlight streamed through her curtains, casting golden shapes on the walls. Lila stretched her arms and rubbed her eyes. Everything seemed normal at first, until she glanced at the mirror by her bed. Her reflection wasn't there. "Where am I?" she whispered. Her voice trembling, she waved her hand in front of her face, but it was gone too. Lila stared at the empty mirror. A strange mix of fear and curiosity bubbled inside of her. "Am I invisible?" she murmured, blinking hard. Lila tiptoed downstairs. Her heart was racing. She could hear her parents talking in the kitchen. "Did Lila come down yet?" her dad said. "No, probably still sleeping," said her mum. Lila's tummy was grumbling, and so she reached out for the bread on the table, but her hand passed straight through it. She tried calling out, "Mum, Dad," but her voice felt like a breeze, soft and unnoticed. Her chest tightened. They really can't see me," she said. At first, the thought scared her, but soon a little smile crept onto her face. If no one can see me, then I can do whatever I want." And with that, she slipped out of the front door into the bright morning air. The town felt different when no one could see her. She wandered past the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread floated through the air, and into the park, where children were playing tag and families were enjoying picnics. But as Lila watched, she began to notice things she hadn't before. old man sat alone on a bench, feeding crumbs to the birds. His eyes seemed very far away, lost in thought. Nearby, a young girl tried to join a group playing with a skipping rope, but they shook her heads and turned away. The girl's shoulders drooped as she walked into the swings all by herself. Lila frowned. "I know how that feels," she whispered. And for the first time, her invisibility did not feel like freedom, but it felt like a chance to help. Lila approached the old man first. As she watched him, she noticed a small flower blooming near the bench. She reached out hesitantly, half expecting her hand to pass straight through it, just like it did with the bread earlier in the morning. But to her surprise, her fingers brushed against the petals. She could touch it. Why this and not the bread? She wondered softly, tilting her head. Deciding not to question it any further, she carefully picked the flower and placed it beside the old man. She whispered, "For you." The old man blinked, startled as he looked around. When he saw the flower, his face softened into a smile. Next, Lila turned to the little girl by the swings. Spotting a smooth stone nearby, she hesitated again before picking it up. Her hand gripped it with ease. Maybe I can touch the things that matter, she thought, a spark of curiosity flickering in her mind. She used the stone to draw a little heart in the dirt by the girl's feet. The girl gasped when she saw it, her lips curving into a shy smile. Lila's chest filled with warmth. Even invisible, she could make someone's day a little brighter. As the sun climbed higher, Lila wandered back towards the school. She peeked into the classroom windows and noticed a teacher carrying a stack of papers, looking so exhausted. Lila thought for a moment, then slipped into the room. She blew gently on the papers, scattering them just enough to make the teacher pause and chuckle. "All right, universe," the teacher muttered, smiling for the first time that day. Lila felt a spark of joy, but then she saw something that made her pause. In the back of the room, there was a poster. It read, "The 20th of November, Universal Children's Day. Celebrate and listen to every child." Lila stared at those words, her invisible hands curling into fists. But not everyone listens to every child, she thought. What about kids like me? When Lila returned home, the house was quiet. Her parents were sitting at the table with their phones in their hands. She wanted to shout, "Look at me! Talk to me!" But she couldn't. Instead, she grabbed a pen and paper, her invisible hand trembling as she wrote, "Dear Mum and Dad, sometimes I feel invisible. Like no one hears me or sees me. But today I learned something. Even if I'm unseen, I can still make a difference, and maybe we can start seeing each other a little more, because every child deserves to be heard. She left the letter on the table and stood back, holding her breath. From the corner of her eye, her mum suddenly noticed the letter and picked it up. She read it, and then tears swelled up in her eyes. Her dad leaned closer, reading over her shoulder. "We didn't realize. We'll do better," he said softly. As Lila's parents spoke, she felt something warm spreading through her chest. She looked down at her hands and gasped. Her fingers were back. Slowly, she became visible again. Her parents pulled her into a hug, their faces full of love and apology. "Oh, Lila, we see you now. We see you." And that night, as she lay in bed, Lila thought about everything she'd learned. She whispered to herself, even when someone feels invisible, they still matter. If we all listen, no one has to feel unseen again. As she drifted off into sleep, she dreamed of a world where every child was heard, loved, and celebrated, just as Universal Children's Day hoped for. And with that, Lila closed her eyes, feeling seen and valued, ready to dream of brighter days ahead.